Sean, thank you so much for taking the time of your. I'm sure that if your experience is anything like the rest of the planet, it's busier now than before. So thank you for taking the time. Why don't we start by you letting us know your context, who you are, your trajectory, and where are you? What part of the planet are you?
Firstly, I'm a full-time academic at the University of Cape Town, which is the sort of one of the oldest university in South Africa. It's regarded as sort of top university in Africa in terms of publications and output. And I'm a sort of associate professor in the historical studies department. And it's also, it's a university I was a student at. Cape Town as a city is my hometown, and I've been involved in various capacities at University of Cape Town. So at the moment I've got a fairly conventional academic job of teaching and doing research, but maybe a little bit of a context, to our entire conversation is that South Africa is in a shutdown like many countries around the world because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But what's been very interesting for me and for a lot of South Africans has been our recent history, not just my history or the university's history, is that South Africa went through probably one of the worst affected countries in the world by HIV/AIDS epidemic.
That is right.
And that has shaped all sorts of things in South Africa in terms of how the state in particular deals with the coronavirus epidemic. And bizarrely, and this is just a quick place here, you can ask me more follow-up questions, is that South Africa was regarded as one of the disastrous cases under the HIV/AIDS pandemic because the president at the time, this is President Mbeki, after Mandela, was one of the famous AIDS denialists.
Yeah.
And it was tragic. It was a real tragedy because in other respects, he was one of the best presidents we've ever had. But on the pandemic, he was terrible. His AIDS denialism was disastrous. We still remain we have the second highest infection rate for HIV/AIDS in the world.
Yeah.
Currently, our population is 59 million people, of whom 8 million are HIV positive. And of those 8 million who are HIV positive, largely because of people that followed him, we are now between about 4.5 million people are on antiretrovirals. So you might say, well, what has this got to do with the current situation? It's one of the big questions not for me personally as academic, but is given the immunodepressant side of the pandemic, and the immune system is so central to the quick infectious rate of coronavirus. One of the big mysteries, and it remains a mystery, is the fact that there are many people HIV positive who are on antiretrovirals. Is it a good or a bad thing? Unclear still. Certainly there is a great fear that the people that are not, this is roughly 3.5 million people who are not on antiretrovirals, will they be more exposed? We don't know. And then maybe a last quick contextual point is that this is the positive side, is the state reacted very quickly.
Very quickly.
Now, compared to being a disastrous nation-state response to the HIV/AIDS pandemic, this time, this new president, who's a very good president, the state acted very quickly. We shut down very quickly. We're regarded by the World Health Organization as one of the success stories in the developing world. But that's the good news. As of this morning, we only have, in terms of the official count, 11,000 cases of coronavirus.
Yeah.
In reality, the actual infection rate is probably 2, 3, 4 times that.
I was looking at the numbers, and
it's the good news.
It's really good. It's really good. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really good. but the main thing, and this is my last contextual point, we've been told explicitly all that the shutdown has done is given the medical services in the state and at various levels of the state time to prepare, because the peak is only going to hit us in September. And even our daily rate used to be about 50, 60, 100 people. Just in the last 5 days, we're now hitting 400 or 500 new cases per day. It's starting to pick up. And the state is more ready now. But and I think the worst is to come. We're just at a different stage, put that way.
Let me take you, Sean, to talk a little bit more in detail about your university. Is this a large university? What type of students do you have? What's the socioeconomic context that you're working with?
Sure. Yeah. It's about the second largest university in the country. I think our registered student population are now about 28,000 students. It's a really expensive university to go to. All universities are quite pricey in South Africa, which changes the class composition of your student demography. But certainly in Cape Town, because of UCT, because of its reputation, it's got lots of good students. Certainly, I'm standing to correction, but probably about 55% of our students are Black and 45% white. The class demography of those 55% Black students varies from faculty to faculty. But one of the key things, that quick little background, consequences that the universities grappled with, and so has all South African universities, is so we went down into quick shutdown mode, all the universities, all the schools as well. But what do you do? And well, how can I put the long story into a short question? How many students don't, the gist of the long story is, how many students don't have access to the internet? Big issue.
Yeah.
And so we estimate lots of surveys, and it's ongoing. I mean, we estimate somewhere between 25 to 30% of our students don't have internet access.
Wow.
So at other universities, it'll be far worse. And that really has major implications for online teaching. So at a postgraduate level, the university-wide and my personal experience, it's been fine. It's actually been better than expected. I'm running a great oral history class online. My students can't go in to do field work, but I can send them off into the archives. So postgraduate-wise, the postgrads have got access to internet. Other than they're not being able to do oral history fieldwork, they got access to on-sites with resources, both in terms of secondary literature and audiovisual archives of the university. But undergrad has been, I nearly swore, it's been a disaster. It's terrible. And it's caused so much division, the undergraduate, the mass-based education issues. And the reality is that a lot of extra work, a lot of extra documents. So when in the past you might have done a lecture with a normal PowerPoint and you do a 45, 50-minute lecture. Now you have to record these lectures and you have to provide detailed lecture notes. So there's been a big pedagogic debate about what do you provide. And particularly for that 25% who can't get access to the online version. That has been a major issue.
Wow. So the university did not close. When did the pandemic hit in Cape Town, Sean? I'm not totally sure.
Sure. I mean, the first infections nationally started in middle of March. And in fact, our first infections obviously came from abroad, not from China, but from Italy. So
it's not a Chinese virus.
Came into the country, infected a few people. No, definitely not a China. No, your president is wrong. It was, but obviously we are now in the serious phase now where, I mean, a few of the initial infections were all travelers initially in March, but now it's the local transmission as it gradually takes root in working class areas. It started off as a middle class traveler disease. Now it's a working class disease spreading, and the state's ready, but it's very hard to. Yeah, I mean, so what was I going to say? So it started in March, and it's been very slow and curbed by the quick shutdown. But what it's meant, one of the implications that there's none of the no face-to-face teaching, whether it's school or university across the country. Yeah. We've just about 10 days ago, the state has relaxed some of the measures. You know, some of the initial measures were relaxed, but in terms of schooling, university education, we are not allowed back. I haven't been to my office for 6 weeks, and no one else. It's completely shut. You know?
Yeah. Interesting.
But,
so you were right before the winter break or in the middle of the semester. It was bad timing, right?
Yes, it was right in the middle of our teaching calendar, which is quite typical for South Africa. So our academic year starts in February. Our first semester runs from mid-February till mid-June. Then we have the winter break, equivalent, you know, your summer break, and then we from late July till November is our second semester. Yeah. So, but it's very clear already. A lot of the academic difficult discussions is that initially, obviously, a lot of the planning was, okay, what do we do for the first semester? What do we do for this semester? But it's now clear that what we're doing, what we're experimenting in terms of curriculum changes, in pedagogic changes in the first semester has to be applicable in the second semester. There is a small chance that my colleagues will go back to office or go back to face-to-face teaching in October. We think, if all goes well, we'll go back in October. But more likely, I think the more likely scenario is that we will only have normal, in inverted commas, university face-to-face teaching in February next year with the new academic year.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And the other consequence is what that means for our student numbers. I don't know. It's going to hit us hard, especially in terms of postgraduate. You're supposed to be recruiting now for next year. It's a real issue.
It's many issues. Yeah. So it's very challenging, very, very challenging for everybody.
Yeah.
So some of the things that I think we're a species that has been successful adapting to. So we're going to have to adapt no matter what. So of the things that you are witnessing, Sean, and you making decisions personally and institutionally, do you see opportunity here for your institution, for us to change our practices as educators? Do you see opportunity? Do you see mostly challenges? How do you? What's your state of ánimo? We say in Spanish. Your feelings about it.
Look, I mean, it's. I don't know. Maybe they might. I mean, I think it's certainly at the moment we are most academics here are, and I don't. I think I'm just talking for myself. We can tend to be dominated with the negative. Yeah. But it often does come up at the end of a conversation. Oh, but isn't there something positive? I mean, certainly societally, the one positive that comes up is that there's clearly benefits for the environment. Really seeing it. I live in the middle of a city with a Mediterranean climate. It's quite extraordinary to see how the natural environment is benefiting. Whether the social people environment is going to change for the good, I don't know. But I don't know. I really don't know. I think I cling, like most academics, to the hope that it will change how we work. University was already geared in the last few years a lot more towards, you know, what we as oral historians might see as far more, more human-centered, empathic, sensitive style of building an institutional culture, you know. And so that has certainly already been, the shifts that have been happening in the institutional culture. It took quite a while. I mean, we were already about 15 years into democracy before my university managed to sort of break from its delusions of working within the Oxbridge tradition, you know. And I mean that in the most negative sense.
In the most negative sense, okay.
Yeah, I mean that in a very pejorative way, you know. But now, so already the institution has been trying to be far more caring, far more student-centered, and so forth. That was partly due through various political upheavals we had with students. But what's going to happen through this pandemic? I don't know. I mean, it's a mystery. I think it's a good question you're asking. I wish I had a clearer answer.
Yeah.
I mean, the other negative, to add to all the negative, is the financial implication. I mean, even have students asking, they're hearing stories, but I mean, I've never in my life before, been asked by students, and they're hearing this. Are you going to keep your job? So I'm a tenured professor with a permanent job, right?
Absolutely.
And never in my 20-odd years of working have I been asked, and it's a perfectly legitimate way. Is your job under threat? That's what we've heard.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we're teaching online, which is not many of my colleagues and I are not particularly big fans of, but it's the only way the university can survive financially. If we shut down courses and reimburse students, the university would have had to cut staff, both academic and non-academic staff. You know?
Exactly. So it seems to me in that boat, I think we're all over the planet in the same boat. We need to remain as institutions not only viable but relevant. And if we're going to be able to reach out and continue being relevant, first, in the particular case of South Africa, it seems to me that the 25-30% of students that are still on the other side of the digital divide, they're going to have to be reached out somehow. And then secondly, maybe our own teaching, and I don't know how you feel about it, but our own teaching needs to be revisited for its urgency, for its relevance, for its adaptability to new conditions. How do we make history to continue to be what it is, a very central component of the human experience, right? When what matters is, am I going to be able to have a job tomorrow? Am I going to be able to eat for families and students, right? And also, I've been following South Africa for the longest time because we're all fans of Mandela, of course, and it's interesting to see the progression. But in the last few years, Sean, South Africa has been sort of having difficulty with that coming back together, right? I had a feeling that the main political party has been facing challenges, and so it's a complicated situation. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, Mandela years were the idealistic beginnings of democracy years, and a lot of good political new laws were passed. Mbeki was a different kind of president, other than his disaster with the pandemic. But the most disastrous period was what we call the Zuma years, from 2009 to 2019. Zuma was just a disaster. He's corrupt, a rapist, and he's central still to what we call the state capture strategy, where he allowed various sections of big business to, and it's ongoing commissions about this. But the current president was a star from the 1990s, Cyril Ramaphosa. He's got his issues, but he's a charismatic figure that's trying to pull the party together, trying to pull the society together, and certainly his opinion rates. I mean, he's been very smart with how he's dealt with the pandemic. Yeah. But one of the worries that is on hold is what does this mean politically? It's only when the pandemic really hits its peak, August, September, October, what that's gonna happen for the party, because the reality is the working class is going to be badly affected. Yeah, I know your inflation rate, your unemployment rate has climbed, but South Africa before the pandemic, this is an official count, which is always too low. Yeah. Our official unemployment rate was 28%. And we
I agree.
just, for years, South Africa has been one of the economies that stagnates. It doesn't go into complete recession, and it doesn't boom. And we've been bumbling along in stagnation rate for the last 5 years. Now, I mean, before the pandemic, we were predicted, the Reserve Bank and the Treasury predicted we would be lucky if we get between 0.5% and 1% growth to the economy. Now, the prediction is a traction of 6%. So you can imagine what's going to happen to the unemployment rate. Our unemployment rate is going to hit the 40%.
Wow.
And how that's going to play out politically for even the best,
Even the best.
possibly the best president we've had for a long time. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a bleak prospect, but here where we, and as institutions of higher education and as educators, we need to bring knowledge and hope to the students. What else can we do, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, Sean, I need to keep these clips a little short, otherwise we'll lose interest in our audience. But I wanna wish you the best in solidarity from the northern part of the planet, and I'm really hoping that that this will turn out not to be that difficult for South Africa as it's being for other nations. Hopefully, because of that, what you were saying, that it was a nation that, because of its experience with prior pandemics, AIDS and whatnot, was in a better disposition to cope with the challenges that you're facing now. Argentina happens to be an interesting case, similar to South Africa in that sense. That Argentina, it has a bad press, but the mechanisms of solidarity and mutualism just kicked in a really interesting way. So each nation has its strengths and challenges, definitely. Well, it's such a pleasure to... Go ahead.
Now, can I leave you with this point, which I wanted to conclude with, is that so I'm very lucky that on the 1st of July, I go on sabbatical. But the book that I'm busy writing, which I've been planning for doing some research on and a lot of reading for the last 3-4 years, it's not a medical history. I'm not a medical historian, but I've been very obsessed with questions about psychic trauma, playing out of doing a lot of work on violence and doing a lot of teaching on the debates around trauma theory, But I, towards the end of last year, managed to pull my overall idea for the book together. And I've been just busy writing the book proposal for OUP Press, and then the pandemic breaks. But here's what keeps me awake. I can't work out. I want to tell you. I'll ask your advice. So a question back at you. Whether this book is now pointless, given its focus, or it's going to be a bestseller because of this context.
I'm thinking about the latter.
Yeah, but listen, this is what the focus of the book is. It's about part of the argument of the book across. I'm not a monograph person. I write essays and then I try and mold it into a monograph. But it's about the dimensions of psychic trauma, which can be caused through political violence, natural disasters, a pandemic like this, etc. Right?
Yeah.
But how the dimensions of psychic trauma that are unhealable. That's in the title of the book, The Unhealable.
The Unhealable.
And yeah, this pandemic starts, and I said to my boss, who's a brilliant, theorist, I said to him, is there any point in doing this book now? He says, no, there's never been a greater reason to write this book now, Yeah. So, I don't know, what do you think?
I think it's very important that we realize that the unhealable part is that we're never going to go back to where we were before this pandemic. Exactly. That we depend on systems that are so feeble, so fragile, that it is time to recognize that and to move into systems that are, it's really going beyond the craziness of the years that we have, decades that we have lived in a neoliberal dream that is untenable. So it's the planet telling us that's it. This is the end of that road, but we need to create another road. So maybe it's a good thing that it's unhealable. Maybe it is a good thing. So I hope you finish the book because it's going to be a challenging read. So I have to see that coming soon. Sean, again, as I said, we could be talking for more than an hour. I'm going to have to call it an end for this particular conversation now, but thank you for your time. Best wishes to you, to your students, to your institution, and I'm really glad that you're having a sabbatical to have time to reflect. We need those minds reflecting.
Thanks very much.
Take good care. Bye.
Yeah.